think I might make this a thing, because why not add one more thing? Although it's been a really long time, so this is more like a revisit remake. Hi guys, this is Connie, and we are in my craft room, and I have a book. This says Aesop's Fables. It has a library thing on it, and the back is ripped off because the librarian gave it to me. This is a copy of Aesop's Fables from my elementary school, my primary school years, and I loved this book. I never actually finished it all the way through any time that I would borrow it, but it still has one of those little things in the back with people who have borrowed it. And if you look on the back here, it's got me room 23. Probably second or third grade, easily. And I would keep coming back, and they finally retired the book, and the librarian just gave it to me because she knew how much I enjoyed this book. But even now, as an adult, I've never actually gotten all the way through this book, and I keep meaning to. So I think what's going to end up happening is, and I've done this in the past, and then my phone died, and excuses, and more books, and lots of things I need to read, and life, and I just don't get around to it. But I think I might start doing TikToks for the smaller ones that I can do under 30 seconds, because there's a lot of Aesop's Fables in here. But in doing that, I want to get through this book. I want to try to do this. I don't know if I can do it a fable a day. I don't think I can keep up with it, but I do want to at least give it a try and start digging into it without going into a Connie, I talk too much, because that's what I do for my video diaries that I keep private, because I talk too much about a lot of things, and I'm not ready to release any of those. Not that I talk trash about anything in particular, it's just I ramble, and unless I'm rambling through reading a book, most people don't want to hear it. But this does have an introduction. It is really old. It's an old copy. The hare and the tortoise. Like, this is how old it is. Do you see these animations? I have no idea how much effort I'm going to put into it, but I don't put a lot of effort into it. Aesop's Fables, a new translation by V.S. Vernon Jones, with an introduction by G.K. Chesterton and illustrations by Arthur Rackham. It looked difficult. I couldn't tell if that was a G, and then I saw that there was a tiny little mark. Yes, it's a G. First published 1912. This edition, 1967. Was in my library in my elementary school in the 80s and 90s. Yeah. Oh, libraries need more resources. Introduction. Aesop embodies an epigram not uncommon in human history. His fame is all the more deserved because he never deserved it. The firm foundations of common sense, the shrewd shots at uncommon sense, that characterize all the fables, belonging not to him but to humanity. In the earliest human history, whatever is authentic is universal, and whatever is universal is anonymous. In such cases, there are always some central man who had first the trouble of collecting them, and afterwards the fame of creating them. He had the fame, and, on the whole, he earned the fame. There must have been something great and human, something of the human future and the human past in such a man, even if he only used it to rob the past or deceive the future. The story of Arthur may have been really connected with the story of Arthur may have been really connected with the most fighting Christianity of falling Rome, or with the most heathen traditions hidden in the hills of Wales. But the word map or Mallory will always mean King Arthur, even though we find older and better origins than the Mabinogian, no idea there, or right latter and worse versions than the Idylls of the King. The nursery fairy tales may have come out of Asia with the Indo-European race, now fortunately extinct. They may have been invented by some fine French lady or gentleman like Perrault. They may possibly even be what they profess to be, but we shall always call the best selection of such tales Grimm's Tales, simply because it is the best collection. The historical Aesop, insofar as he was historical, would seem to have been a Pythagorean oh nope, that's not Pythagorean. A Phrygian slave, or at least one not to be specially and symbolically adorned with the Pythagorean cap of liberty. He lived, if he did live, about the 6th century before Christ, in the time that the Cratius, whose story we love and suspect like everything else in Herodotus. There are also stories of deformity of feature and ready ribaldry of tongue, stories which, as the celebrated cardinal said, explain, though they do not excuse, his having been hurled over a high precipice at Delphi. It is for those who read the Fables to judge whether he was really thrown over the cliff for being ugly and offensive, or for rather being highly moral and correct. But there is no kind of doubt that the general legend of him may justly rank him with a race too easily forgotten in our modern comparisons, the race of the great philosophic slaves. Aesop may have been a fiction like Uncle Remus. He was also, like Uncle Remus, a fact. It is a fact that slaves in the old world could be worshipped like Aesop or loved like Uncle Remus. It is odd to note that both the great slaves told their best stories about beasts and birds. But whatever be fairly due to Aesop, the human tradition called Fables is not due to him. This had gone on long before any sarcastic freedman from Phrygia had or had not been flung off a precipice. This has remained long after. It is to our advantage indeed to realize the distinction, because it makes Aesop more obviously effective than any other fabulist. Grimm's tales, glorious as they are, were collected by 2 German students, and if we find it hard to be certain of a German student, at least we know more about him than we know about the Phrygian slave. The truth is, of course, that Aesop's fables are not Aesop's fables any more than Grimm's fairy tales were ever Grimm's fairy tales. But the fable and the fairy tale are things the fable and the fairy tale are things utterly distinct. There are many elements of difference, but the plainest is plain enough. There can be no good fable with human beings in it. There can be no good fairy tale without them. Aesop, or Babrius, or whatever his name was, understood that for a fable, all the persons must be impersonal. They must be like abstractions in algebra, or like pieces in chess. The lion must always be stronger than the wolf, just as 4 is always double of 2. The fox in a fable must move crooked, as the knight in chess must move crooked. The sheep in a fable must march on, as the pawn in chess must march on. The fable must not allow for the crooked captures of the pawn. It must not allow for what Balzac called the revolt of a sheep. The fairy tale, on the other hand, absolutely revolves on the pivot of human personality. If no hero were to fight the dragons, we should not even know that they were dragons. If no adventurer were cast on the undiscovered island, it would remain undiscovered. If the miller's third son does not find the enchanted garden where the 7 princesses stand, white and frozen, why then? They will remain white and frozen and enchanted. If there is no personal prince to find the Sleeping Beauty, she will simply sleep. Fables repose upon quite the opposite idea, that everything is itself, and will, in any case, speak for itself. The wolf will always be wolfish, the fox will always be foxy. Something of the same sort may have been meant by the animal worship in which Egyptian and Indian and many other great peoples have combined. Men do not, I think, love beetles or cats or crocodiles with a wholly personal love. They salute them as expressions of what abstract and anonymous energy in nature, which to anyone is awful, and to an atheist must be frightful. So in all the fables that are or are not Aesop's, all the animal forces drive like innate forces, like great rivers or growing trees. It is the limit and the loss of all such things that they cannot be anything but themselves. It is their tragedy that they could not lose their souls. This is the immortal justification of the fable, capitalized F. That we could not teach the plainest truths so simply without turning men into chessmen. We cannot talk of such simple things without using animals that do not talk at all. Suppose for a moment that if you turn the wolf into a wolfish baron, or the fox into a foxy diplomatist, you will at once remember that even barons are human. You will be unable to forget that even diplomatists are men. You will always be looking for that accidental good humor that should go with the brutality of any brutal man. For that allowance for all delicate things, including virtue, that should exist in any good diplomatist. Once put a thing on 2 legs instead of 4 and pluck it of feathers, and you cannot help asking for a human being, either heroic as in the fairy tales, or unheroic as in the modern novels. But by using animals in this austere and arbitrary style, as they are used on the shields of heraldry or hieroglyphics of the ancients, men have really succeeded in handing down those tremendous truths that are called truisms. If the chivalric lion be red and rampant, it is rigidly red and rampant. If the sacred ibis stands anywhere on 1 leg, it stands on 1 leg forever. In this language, like a large animal alphabet, are written some of the first philosophic certainties of men. As the child learns A for ass, or B for bull, or C for cow, so man has learned here to connect the simpler and stronger creatures with the simpler and stronger truths. That a flowing stream cannot befoul its own fountain, and that anyone who says it does is a tyrant and a liar. That a mouse is too weak to fight a lion, but too strong for the cords that can hold a lion. That a fox who gets most out of a flat dish may eat easily, get least out of a deep dish. That the crow whom the gods forbid to sing, the gods nevertheless provided with cheese. That when the goat insults from a mountaintop, it is not the goat that insults, but the mountain. All these are deep truths, deeply graven on the rocks wherever men have passed. It matters nothing how old they are or how new. They are the alphabet of humanity, which, like so many forms of primitive picture writing, employs any living symbol in preference to man. These ancient and universal tales are all of animals, as the latest discoveries in the oldest prehistoric caverns are all of animals. Man, in his simpler states, always felt that he himself was something too mysterious to be drawn. But the legend he carved under these cruder symbols was everywhere the same, and whether fables began with Aesop or began with Adam, whether they were German and medieval as Reynard the Fox, or as French in Renaissance as La Fontaine, the upshot is everywhere essentially the same. That superiority is always insolent because it is always accidental, that pride goes before a fall, and that there is such a thing as being too clever by half. You will not find any other legend but this written upon the rocks by any hand of man. There is every type and time of fable, but there is only one moral to the fable, because there is only one moral to everything. G.K. Chesterton. And that's just the introduction. And there's like 3 or 4 pages. Let's see, oh, they're back and front. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's a lot of tables of contents. There's also another content of list of illustrations that I get to go through as well. Oh my word, there's like 3 or 6 of these. And I have already done this one. This one's actually on my TikTok so far. And so I think if I ever decide to actually get my act together and do something about this, my hope is that I guess I probably should just start at the beginning, and then when I come to the end, stop. And I want to post as many of these as possible on various forms of social media. There's short content bits, and there's so many of these, and they should be easy enough to read most of them very quickly. I know that The Fox and the Grapes was definitely, it's the first one in the book, and I know that I was able to at least do that one, I think. The Fox and the Grapes. A hungry fox saw some fine bunches of grapes hanging from a vine that was trained along a high trellis, and did his best to reach them by jumping as high as he could into the air. But it was all in vain, for they were just out of reach, so he gave up trying, and walked away with an air of dignity and unconcern, remarking, "I thought those grapes were ripe, but I see now that they are quite sour." And usually if I can get through that in one shot, you get a less than 30-second clip that I can share to the rest of the world. And it somehow gets a couple hundred views on the internet. The sun has not gone down. The beauty of summer coming. Even though it's like 7 o'clock at night. I'm still fighting off a cold. It's April 17th, 2021. So it's not COVID because I've gotten it tested. It's a funny season to be in and to think of versus renditions of this I've done years ago before a global pandemic. Lots of things to think about, lots of things to read. So that's what we're going to try and do at some point here in the future. So be careful with that and enjoy. Please and thank you. And I will hopefully see you with some sort of compilation of Aesop's Fables. And the goal, if I can get myself to read one of these a day, I don't know if I'll post them every day, but if I start reading one a day, we'll get through the book eventually. This book has 224 pages. If I read one a day, we should get it done in a year. Can you get it done before I turn 40? I'm maybe turning 38 this year. I keep forgetting because I don't want to count 2020. But yeah, definitely could do this. I know it's absolutely something that can be done. So I want to try to make that goal and start sticking to it. Shameless plug for @ConnieTryOn for most social media things. If you think it's fun, you think this is interesting, feel free to follow along and listen. I look forward to seeing you for the next upload, the next installment. I have a lot of books to read. I have a lot of books I need to finish. And so there'll be lots of Connie Reads currently uploading on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Hopefully these will start uploading somewhere in the near future on a more regular and consistent basis. But I'm looking forward to, I want this to be a goal that I actually get done in the next year. So that means it's April, May, June, July won't count because, so we're less than 2 months out from my 38th birthday. I would love to get this done before I turn 39. Or if I get planned well enough ahead, maybe I could just start posting it in my 39th year. I don't think that's going to happen. I want to make this more relevant and make this happen more often. So, who knows? Yeah, I'm looking at 2 other books right now, and you're sitting on one that I still would like to read just for my own benefit, but a lot of books. It's one thing. A year into this pandemic, I finally got more books. Lots of books. So many books. We're going to start trying to finish this one up. We definitely need to finish this one up and probably do the one in front of it beforehand. I picked this up at one of those free libraries, so spent lots of time where, yeah, see, still haven't finished it. Just got through chapter 2 of this one. I have 2 other books upstairs, 3 other books upstairs that I don't plan on putting on camera just to read. I've got another 2 books coming in the mail, and this box has more books as well. So many books, so little time. And now I've gone on for 20 minutes, so I talk too much. I will see you for the next one. Bye.